स्वागत है आप सबका चर्चा इन ब्लैक होल में। और इस पॉडकास्ट में मितेश और मैंने मिलकर बात की है
Dr. Malpani, sir, who is an IVF specialist and also an angel investor,
तो
and who thinks that school system is shit and you should not go to school or probably not go to college.
स्कूल सिस्टम शिट है, कॉलेज सिस्टम शिट है और बायजूस शिट है।
But you shit
तो
है.
हमने जो पॉडकास्ट शुरू किया वो तो इस चीज़ पे शुरू किया कि उनको लिंक्डइन से बैन कर दिया था जबकि उनके 150 के फॉलोअर्स थे। लेकिन बाय द एंड
without any reason.
विदाउट एनी प्रॉपर रीजन, लेकिन बाय द एंड ऑफ दिस कॉन्वर्जेशन वी वर कन्विंस कि लाइक कॉलेज बेकार है। काहे हम इतना टाइम हमने बिताया कॉलेज में, स्कूल में और लाइक ये सब में, और कैसे हमें इस सिस्टम से निकल जाना चाहिए और हमें इस सिस्टम के
What the-
ऑल्टरनेटिव्स ढूंढने शुरू कर देने
Alternative
चाहिए।
scam.
और हमने बैठ के डिस्कस किया कि एक ऑल्टरनेटिव है होम स्कूलिंग, which can be a good option for like students and everything. So we touched about that and it was a great conversation.
And I think by the end of the conversation, you will be convinced that you should also probably try homeschooling for someone you know.
और अगर होम स्कूलिंग नहीं भी कर रहे तो तुम्हारे बच्चे शायद आगे जाके होम स्कूलिंग ही करें।
फिर कर लेंगे. Yup.
हाँ, it was a great conversation. We enjoyed it, like we really enjoyed it. ऐसा होता है
Also
ना,
touched upon
कुछ ही conversations होते हैं जो like 1 घंटे तक तुम्हें खींच जाते हैं,
खींच जाता है. Yup.
and it was one of
It
those
was
conversations.
worth it.
And I hope you will enjoy this well. What we can start with is like you got banned on LinkedIn for some reason. What
For a very good reason, actually. I consider that a mark of honor. You know, that's what really gave me fame and name and glory. This was the guy who got kicked out of LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn में 1,000 लोग हैं जिनके 100,000 followers है, 200,000 followers है. I had a lot of followers, and that was wow. You know, I'm such an important guy. I'm such an influencer. So many people look up to me, and maybe I'm the only guy with 150,000 followers who got kicked out of LinkedIn. So I think that is much more unusual, more valuable, more of a signaling mechanism than, yeah, 100,000 mein kya badi baat hui aajkal. So the reason why is because I think the reason I got kicked out was I think I had the guts to speak up. And that's, you know, there are certain things in life which I think are deeply ingrained. So one of the things is I was always taught by my parents, you need to be curious, you need to learn all the time. You know, there's just so much information. So I think that was important. I was also taught that you shouldn't be scared. You should speak up. And there will be consequences to speaking up, some of which you may not be very happy with. But not speaking up is the biggest sin. And you can't operate from a position of fear. So one of the things I'm a big believer in is one is integrity. So be honest. The second is curiosity, which means you always want to be learning more. But I think equally importantly, you should stand up for what you think is right. And let's be honest, on LinkedIn, when I took a panga with Byjus, I had nothing against Byjus. Okay, you know, I mean, I don't compete with them. They're doing very well for themselves. All that stuff is fine. And yet I kept on speaking about what Byjus and Whitehead Jr. was doing to the edtech system. People would say, what do you care? They would come up with all kinds of conspiracy theories. Arey yaar, this guy must have had an opportunity to invest in Byjus. He missed that opportunity. Iske liye उसका दिल जल रहा है, इसके लिए is doing his best to print. Oh, you know, standard Indian crab mentality. खुद के तो कोई success stories नहीं है. बेचारे बाईजू अभी डेकाकॉन हो गया है, इसके लिए उसको खराब लग रहा है. That's why he's trying to pull it down. 50 different hypotheses. And the only reason I speak up, quite frankly, is because I'm a big believer in the opportunity which good quality education offers to the next generation of students. I think that is potentially a huge game changer for the entire country. Because the only thing we have going for us in India is what we call a demographic sweet spot. The fact that such a large proportion of our population is young. What are we doing with all these students? We're consigning them to exams, marks, homework, tuition. बड़ा होकर बच्चा कॉलेज में जाएगा, कॉलेज में जाके जॉब करेगा. And the fact of the matter is the system is such a pyramidal this thing that out of 100,000 people who apply for IIT, how many are going to get in? 100. What's going to happen to all the rest? We don't see the consequences of all the damage which we're doing. Then the next thing is, okay, that's fine. You know, the education system is a mess. Why are you picking on poor Byjus? Because two things. I think Byjus had the opportunity to be a game changer. They are the ones who got technology into this space. They are the ones who raised the money. They could have been a force for such tremendous good for this country. Okay, guys, explore. There is no shortage of information. You need to learn. Pariksha ke liye to padhai karo, but there's so much more. And what did they end up doing? They focused on putting profits before learning. Lakshmi was more important than Saraswati. And that bothers me. I think the whole point is that Lakshmi is always going to be greedy, and it's a zero-sum game as far as wealth is concerned. The more you have, the less someone else has. That's not the way knowledge works. The more you give away, the more you have for yourself, and the more other people have. So I was very open. I have a mind of my own. I don't think I'm an idiot. I'm a doctor. I'm well informed. So I would express my opinion. I always used to do very well in school. I've got umpteen number of gold medals. But it's only now I realize some of the harm which schooling did. Tubelight chamka, thodi der se chamka. But the hope is if I start sharing with people now when they're young, when they're students themselves or the parents have kids in schools, they will not repeat the same mistakes. And the reality was, 40 years ago, when I was in college, opportunities are very constrained and very limited. That's all changed dramatically today. So why should you use exactly the same teaching techniques which you used to teach me to teach the current generation? That makes no sense. The thing which bothered me about Byjus is they would exploit poor families. They wouldn't be able to exploit me, for example. I understand there's Khan Academy, there is YouTube University, there's a wealth of resources. I want my kids to be self-directed learners. I want them to learn for themselves. I don't want them to be spoon-fed. I think tuitions are toxic. So that's not an issue as far as someone like me is concerned. But look at my poor driver. He has a limited income. He's not very educated. He doesn't understand. He watches all these ads, whether it's Shah Rukh Khan or whatever else. He's unhappy with the kids' government school or whichever school because there are just too many kids, not enough teachers. So he's looking for an alternative. He's very vulnerable, whether it's FOMO, ignorance, gullibility. And the way these guys missell is, nahi tum free trial class lo, koi bhi problem hua to 15 din mein refund kar lo. All that stuff. It's been well documented by multiple online journalists like The Ken and Morning Context. But this just keeps on growing and growing. And I said, that's not right. Why are you mis-selling to these people? It's not good for the kids, obviously, but it's not good for you in the long run. That's an unhealthy, toxic DNA. You cannot create a unicorn based on lies. I had conversations with the Byjus founder, Ravindran, with the investor, with the HR guys, said, you're mis-selling. And unfortunately, you're teaching these young engineers who join you to mis-sell. Because all they understand is these are our revenue targets. If I meet these revenue targets, I will get a bonus and I will get a promotion. If I don't meet these revenue targets, I'll get kicked out. Papi पेट का सवाल है, यहाँ जॉब मिल रहा है, पैसे दे रहे हैं, बोनस है, ये है, वो है, मेरा सीटी इतना होगा. मैं अगर मेरा पापी पेट नहीं भरूंगा तो किसका क्या होने वाला है. और बाकी तो सब लोग कर रहे हैं. मैं किस खेत की मूली हूँ. This is a decacorn. So many. It's so easy to justify things which in your heart of hearts are wrong, but it's easy to rationalize it. And this is what people kept on doing. Brought this out. So then, I get a love letter from LinkedIn saying this is not correct. You shouldn't be doing this. This is not acceptable community practice. I said, please tell me what I'm doing wrong. All this is documented. It's fair enough. If there's anything wrong, I'm okay with this. Nothing. And then another love letter saying, sorry, we're kicking you out of the platform. I said, why are you kicking me out of the platform? If I've done something wrong, we don't care. We're a private platform. This is not community friendly. And obviously the reason is because Byjus is such a big advertiser on LinkedIn, because that's where all the bakras come from. Then, kuch bhi bolega to kick out karo. Kya badi baat hai? And what actually got my gut boiling, really I was angry with LinkedIn, is they told me, if you're not happy with our decision, you can complain. Go to the US and complain, because LinkedIn is a US company. I said, what rubbish. You take money in Indian rupees, you hire Indian employees, you have an Indian office, you do everything else. So when it suits your convenience, tum India mein paise kamate ho. When it doesn't suit your convenience, instead of seeking redressal in an Indian court, you're forcing me to go to a US court because I'm not going to go. What kind of rubbish is it? We've actually sued them in Mumbai High Court.
Whoa.
It's a constitutional matter. I think it's important. Tushar, this is not about me, boss. I'm settled in life. I'm wealthy. I'm rich. Everything is sorted. Kuch bhi nahi karunga, I'm absolutely okay. I can go holiday every single day the rest of my life and I'll be okay. But I think if people like me, who are independently wealthy, who care about the next generation, don't speak up, then who will speak up? People like Tushar and Mitesh dare not speak up because you're young, you have your whole life ahead of you. Anyone says something, you'll get thrown out of your job, or 50 different bad things can happen. And those things have happened to me. They actually wanted to make an example out of me. Zyada badbad karega, we'll kick you out of LinkedIn. मुझे कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. But for someone who's looking for jobs, बहुत फर्क पड़ता है. I didn't want that signaling to go. You cannot speak up against these guys just because they're unicorns. Okay, होंगे, but इसका मतलब नहीं. It's ultimately a public platform. So lots of things. My wife thinks तो दिन भर झगड़ा ही करता रहता है लोगों के साथ.
It was actually one of my questions because like most of the people who provocate someone on like LinkedIn or Twitter, any platform for that matter, usually do it to just gain followers because they know okay, like if they're polarized about something, they will get followers. But you don't have anything to like gain out of social media. You're just putting your thoughts in.
This following thing is, there's something called a vanity metric. So I understand the importance of a vanity metric. I have nothing against it. If you get a dopamine kick, कि 10,000 follower के साथ 20,000 follower, ठीक है. The way you look at it is, the only reason Times of India wrote an article about me on LinkedIn as an influencer is because I happened to 100,000 followers. So that happens to be the currency. But honestly, I think that's a distraction. And that's one of the things I've learned by being a doctor. That what I'm trying to do is play the long game. Don't take shortcuts. It doesn't help. You want a reputation where patients will trust you. So what does the long game mean? You don't worry about these silly things like funding raise kiya ki nahi, valuation kitna hai ki nahi, as far as the startup space goes. You don't care about, how many followers you have or whatever. And I don't provoke people just in order to get a reaction or to increase my follower count. I think the one thing I told you before, I pride myself on is integrity and authenticity. These are things I care about. I also tell people I'm an equal opportunity critic. I will be happy to criticize the BJP. I'm happy to criticize the Congress. I'm happy to criticize politicians. I mean, all of us are citizens. And when you see a lot of this rubbish happening, I think by choosing to keep quiet, we're underestimating the power we can wield. Are there consequences? Yes. Do you pay a price for this? Yes. Then you have to decide, रात को नींद कैसे आती है? Some people feel happy not having to rock the boat because they're too scared to do it. I would have a lot of problem being forced to keep quiet. That gets my goat. I care about equality. I've been very privileged. I've been very fortunate. What happens to the other people who aren't? Who's going to talk to them? So again, but it's, I'm not kind of looking for fights. But when there are so many obvious areas of unfairness, then I think ignoring them is also not the right approach. Someone needs to speak up. And then if you want someone else to speak up, then you should have the guts to speak up yourself.
Got it. And just because you are not going to have any like much consequences out of this whole thing, you're much more fearless on the social media and everything.
Not so easy, boss. Of course there are consequences. There are first order consequences, second order consequences.
I would like to know about some.
I mean, some of it is very obvious. So one thing is, for example, you attract a lot of trolls, and after some time you get a thick skin, but whatever you may say, you get upset and angry when someone says something unfair or a clear lie or distorts your words. So that's a work in progress. What the children, but you must understand, Tushar. For example, if I'm vocal about, let's say, big shot investors like Sequoia in Byjus, tomorrow if one of my startups wants to raise money from one of these VCs, what is the going to be? Arey yaar, ye Dr. Malpani ne usko paise diye. Don't touch him. Or, I mean, people get a little bit of a reputation. This guy's a difficult guy to deal with. We don't want someone who's got Dr. Malpani on a cap table. Of course, there are consequences. Do I care? No. And I'm very upfront with my investors. Look, this is what I stand for. I'm upfront with the entrepreneurs. पट्टा है तो मेरे से ले, नहीं पट्टा है तो कोई shortage थोड़ी ही है. It's just a different philosophy. But all I want to be is open and transparent with my philosophy. I don't want to lie about it. My hypothesis is investors don't do you a favor by giving you money. Your secret sauce should be to add value for the user. As long as you do that, people will automatically come. Again, but like I said, so a lot of people, तो बातें बहुत बड़ी-बड़ी करता रहता है Dr. Malpani. तेरी success stories क्या है? Sequoia manages an AUM of billions of dollars. What have you done? I said, that's fine. I've done nothing. And I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm not trying to score any brownie points. I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. I understand this is a slow process. Nothing's going to happen perhaps for 5 years, 10 years. Maybe nothing will ever happen. I cannot control outcomes. I can control the process. And this is a process I deeply believe in. And I will continue plugging away. God is kind. It's my personal money. I don't have to answer to an LP कि तूने मेरे पैसे के साथ क्या किया. People don't understand the amount of constraints which VCs have to live with. Because VCs are constantly fundraising. Because एक बार एक fund खत्म हो गया तो दूसरा raise करो, दूसरा खत्म हो गया raise करो. They're selling all the time. So even if you love an entrepreneur and let's say, it doesn't fit within your investment thesis, the VC has no freedom to do it. They might be able to sign $1 million checks, but it comes with a lot of baggage. As an investor, my check size is much smaller, but the baggage is much less. I only need to answer to my wife. And I don't think she's going to divorce me now.
We can edit this part if you want.
That's fine. So, I think she's kind of given up on me. She says, I don't understand why you keep on doing this stuff. She's very supportive in the sense she understands that, what you're doing is standing for a cause, that this is an important cause to understand for. But the whole thing is, don't you have better things to do with your life? Why should there be other people who should be doing it? I said, the reality is because there aren't other people doing it, that's why I need to do it. Someone needs to stand up. Will anything happen? Maybe nothing will ever happen. That's okay. I'm very outcome agnostic. In the sense, if I invest in a startup, I'm a big boy. I understand that startup is quite likely to fail. And that's okay. Not that I like losing money and not that I'm wasting it or burning it. I invest in startups to make money, but you can't control some of this stuff.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what exactly do you think what is Byjus doing wrong, which is not seen by most of the people who are using Byjus? Is it the problem with the way of teaching? Is it the problem with the curriculum? Or
And
what is
one more thing I have in mind, okay, what Byjus right now is doing is done by coaching industry
all
as
the
well,
time?
all the time.
Yeah.
And
So are you saying one wrong justifies another?
No. That will be I'm just saying you said in between this whole thing Byjus will fail because it's working on lies. But the coaching industry in Kota is like blooming, so I don't think they will fail. So
I think that's a great question. Let me address that. When I first started, I was critical about Byjus, and everyone would say, "You keep on talking about this is bad, this is bad. You tell us what is good. Where are the healthy alternatives? Criticize करने से क्या होता है? कोई भी criticize कर सकता है. कुछ अच्छा बताओ." So I said, "Look, stop and think. If Byjus was really adding value, they'd achieved a product market fit, they would not need to keep on hiring and firing an army of salesmen. Because by that time, you would have enough of a critical mass and enough of delighted users who would, I mean, the 7th standard Byjus was great. When the 6th standard students said, "Arey yaar, tu Byjus to tujhko lena hi chahiye." So that's none of that has ever happened. You're looking for new bakras all the time. You're not getting any in tier 1 cities, you're going to tier 2 cities. You're not getting any tier 2 cities, you're going to tier 3 cities. You can't find any more, therefore you're giving free trial classes on Horlicks bottles. Because you're just stuffing sales channels. You're saying, "Dekh, usne trial class liya. Humko malum hai 100 trial class lenge to ek to bachcha pakda jayega. Either he'll get fed up of my calls or whatever." Anyway, whatever. So that's their sales model. So coming back to some of the mis-selling which they're doing. Again, I think it's wrong at multiple levels. I think it's wrong at the junior engineers or whoever they hire or the junior MBAs, because I think you're messing up their minds. Sales is actually an honorable profession if you're adding value to the customer. But if you're mis-selling, you're messing up everything. I think the worst thing is then because Byjus has done so much mis-selling, the entire edtech industry has got such a terrible reputation. No one trusts anything anymore, which is bad because there are some good social impact edtech entrepreneurs who care about students, who want to put students first. But effectively, they've just been thrown out of the market because everything has got monopolized by people like Byjus. Let me ask you one question. Byjus was not the first mover as far as online video classes went. It was Khan Academy. It's not like Byjus innovated. What did Byjus do? Byjus took a Khan Academy model and then customized it for Indian students. And then went out and raised tons of money so you could keep on acquiring companies. Because you can't do anything innovative or original yourself. To Osmo kharido, ye kharido, wo kharido. And after that, You still wasn't enough, therefore you keep on mis-selling. So it's a great mis-selling engine. That I'd give full marks. No argument about that. But to come back to your question, why are you blaming Byjus? You're giving what parents want. Parents want their kids to score high exam marks. Kids aren't getting high exam marks by going to school, so they go to tuition classes, and quota has been around for so many years. The irony is, what Byju's first original promise was, we will do it all online. Now they've gone back and saying, now we're doing it offline as well. So now the standard model is digital, online, hybrid, whatever else you want. But I think that entire thing is broken. I think all this was fine. This entire obsession we had with marks. And, let's be honest, when I was in school, like I said before, I didn't understand why it was an unhealthy obsession. I didn't understand why it was completely messed up. And why have I realized that now? Because I've started digging deeper. I've started doing more homework. I've started understanding, historically, why the entire schooling system was not designed for students. The entire schooling system was designed by the British Raj and people like Lord Macaulay, who felt threatened by the Indian traditional Gurukul system of village schools, and therefore needed to replace that. So you needed to create two tiers. You needed to create the inferior Indians for sab kuch samajhta nahi hai. And this is the English, who will teach you how to speak English. And we're still obsessed with that. You have all these brown sahibs, your ability to speak in English is much more important than your IQ or your EQ or whatever else. English is an important language, but it shouldn't become the medium of instruction for anyone who isn't born in England or USA, for example. There are lots of problems with this. So anyway, like I said before, I didn't know all this. If you'd asked me all these questions 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to give you these answers. But I've read books. There are books, and these are classics. These books have been around now for 30, 40 years. The tragedy is no one reads them. Do you know why no one reads them, Tushar?
Maybe because it's not important to them, or they are not marketable enough.
Or schools are not telling them to read them. Schools are like syllabus.
Because they're not in the syllabus. Thank you so much. I'm sure if schools created a syllabus for parents which said, this is what you need to do in order to teach your kids. And if of course, schools will never advise these books, and I'll come back to that in a minute why. But if parents were enlightened enough and did that, I think a lot of these problems would go away. But the reality is, parents have all been schooled themselves. And the one thing schooling does, guaranteed, is to brainwash. It stops you from thinking for yourself. Some people recover quickly. Some people like me take 30 years for the tube light to go on, whatever it may be. But I think it takes a long time. And there's so much social pressure, peer pressure. Bachcha drop out karega to kya hoga? Usko job nahi milega, bhuka marega. मेरी देखभाल कौन करेगा? So, अरे IAS officer बनना चाहिए, ये बनना चाहिए. But they don't seem to understand that what was true 30 years ago is no longer true. And what is going to be true 10 years from now is going to be even more dramatically different. School teaches you an archaic set of skills which are completely unimportant and irrelevant even in today's world. Forget about tomorrow's world. But parents don't have the courage. They're scared. They don't know how to do some of these things. And therefore, we're doing this in baby steps, quite frankly. Something all parents will agree with. Exams are bad. Because, kids get stressed out, they get anxious, they forget everything. Even if they know the answers, because of the stress, they're not being able to do well. Some kids do very well on exams. I did very well on exams, but most don't. Exams are designed to create failures. They create anxiety, stress, you cramp for them, and the moment the exam's over, you forget everything. So I think all kids hate exams. Even the toppers hate exams. Because just because you topped in November doesn't mean that you're going to top in December. And then, shit, I missed that one mark. I knew that answer. That teacher is partial. Yeah, she has a soft corner for the guy who got better marks than me. So many things. So none of it is healthy at all. It creates a sense of competition, not cooperation. So exams. Then because you need to do well in exams, your teachers overload you with homework. First, why are you so incompetent that you cannot finish the syllabus in your classroom? And then you want to burden the poor kids with homework and the poor kids' parents with homework. So that's a second set. तो अपने से तो जमता नहीं है, बस मुझे क्या समझता है अलजेब्रा तो मुझे स्कूल में भी जब मैं स्कूल जाती थी तो भी मुझे नहीं समझता था, अभी तो कुछ समझता नहीं है. So I had to get tuitions for my kids. And then tuitions also comes in, brand name, expensive tuitions. all that kind of con advertise karta hai, all that stuff. So I think whether it's your obsession with marks, exams, tuition, homework, all of that has become a toxic combination. The irony is, you do all this because you want your kid to get a job, right? बस तू engineer हो जा, Infosys में job ले ले, you're set for life. The interesting thing is you talk to the engineering HR department, and the first thing they will tell you is all these engineers we hire are unemployable. We have to sit and get them to unlearn all the rubbish they were taught in 4 years of medical college, because they're still teaching them all rubbish, which is irrelevant. Then we have to help them to learn and relearn all the skill sets. So which means you're not even helping your kids to get decent jobs. You're continuing doing this because you cannot think of anything better to do, because you've been so brainwashed and you're scared. So a lot of times, say, okay, let's try something else. Kaun karega? Kiske paas time hai? So, people, when you don't want to do something, you'll find 50 excuses not to do it. It's not my job. That's teachers. They're professionals. Ye mere bas ki baat nahi hai. Mere paas time nahi hai. Fala. All ridiculous excuses. There are always solutions. And the beauty is there are existing alternatives. People are successfully pulling this off. And one of the things we're trying to create is a lot of awareness about people who've been extremely successful with some of these alternatives. So we're not even saying go whole hog. We're saying homeschooling is the holy grail. This is the reason why. But you don't want to do it, don't do it. No one's forcing you. Continue sending your kid to school. Don't obsess about his exam marks. Because when you obsess, he gets worried and it's contagious and transmissible. It doesn't correlate with any future success in life. You don't remember how much you scored in the 5th standard. What difference is it going to make to him when he's in the 5th standard? I don't. Or whatever I remember, I selectively remember. But anyway, so don't forget about marks. Forget about exams because they don't matter anything. Forget about the homework. Tell your teacher, itna homework de do. And the thumb rule is that for every grade, 10 minutes of homework is fine, so the kid can revise. No more than that. So at the most, if you're in the 8th standard, the maximum should be 1 hour. The trouble is, maths teacher homework deti, geography teacher homework deti, the left hand has no idea what the right hand is doing. Anyway, so that's it. There's a lot of burden on the kid, on the parents. All these things people are now increasingly aware of. I was saying there are alternatives. There are free alternatives available. What is the solution which we are offering? Our hypothesis is kids don't need teachers to learn. Okay. Kids don't need textbooks to learn. Kids don't need anything to learn. I think, what did a toddler do in order to learn how to speak Hindi at home? What did a toddler do in order to learn how to walk?
Imitate.
Yes. We're born with that desire. We're social animals. We copy our parents because we want to talk and walk and do what our parents do. We want to hang out with adults. We want to be listened to. Why am I doing this podcast with you? Because I want my voice to be heard. Mm-hmm. So I think that is wired in our DNA, this thing. The trouble is toddlers are happy to do it. The moment you enter school, your teacher bolegi bachcha wo karne ka. You're interested in nahi yaar, pariksha mein nahi aa raha, I don't mind. First question kids ask, is this going to be in the syllabus or not? They refuse. And they hate reading. Because the only thing they're taught is to cram a book, which means you start from page 1. You end up at page 30, most boring history book, geography book, full of rubbish, but you have to cram it backwards, forwards, everything else. And you forget it the moment you've gone to the next class. You actually become allergic to reading because you don't know how to read. No one teaches you these skill sets. You don't know how to learn for yourself. And we're saying there are only 4 things which kids need to learn. And you can provide all these 4 things. The first thing is they need intrinsic motivation. You cannot force feed someone to do something. That will work. You can bribe them. You can cajole them. You can threaten them up to a particular point. But for how long will you do it? So if kids care about something, if a kid wants to learn about dinosaurs, or if you take a kid to school and he sees a polar bear, he wants to learn about polar bears, boss, let him watch National Geographic. Let him go on YouTube. He'll know so much more about polar bears till you'll get fed up about how much he knows. So I think and the intrinsic motivation will keep on changing. What a 7-year-old wants to know is very different from what a 10-year-old wants to know, is very different from what a 15. That's fine. Allow him to explore. Give him that confidence that, hey, I want to figure something out. I will be able to figure it out. So that's one. Encourage him. There are so many teachable moments, but don't keep on telling him, nahi yaar, tu abhi homework kar. But the kid wants to learn about dinosaurs because that's what's caught his eye. You're forcing him to do some Aurangzeb or whatever else which he can't care less about. That's not right. Along with intrinsic motivation, provide him with the resources. And the good news is all those resources are available free online. If anyone tells me it's not, I'd say, you're lazy and you haven't bothered to look. Whether it's YouTube University, if you just want free flowing stuff, whether it's adapted to the syllabus, you can go to Khan Academy or Magnet Brains. Lots of high quality free stuff on a video. And it's not just video. There are multiple different formats, whether it's books, audiobooks, whatever else. So, anyone who tells me they can't find stuff, I think is just being lazy. So provide them with the resources. And these days, the resources have become very easily available online. And now with 5G, it's become even easier. All you really need is a device. You can beg, borrow, steal, rent, whatever else you want to do. So I don't think any of these are a problem. I think the third thing a kid requires is adult supervision. I'm not naive. I also know if you leave a kid alone, he'll most probably play games all day long. That's fine. Which is why you have to say, boss, you play as many games as you like. I don't mind. But I expect you to fulfill so much. So, we're happy to give you ice cream for dessert, but you need to eat your dinner. And kids understand the logic behind that. So you need to be able to provide them with that. You know what? The beauty is the adult supervision is not what a class teacher does in school. What a school does in 8 hours, you can finish in 2 hours, guaranteed. Because most of what school is wasted on is waiting for the bus, sitting in the bus, waiting for the classes to start, waiting for recess, waiting for lunch, waiting for the teacher to come, waiting for the teacher to take a roll call, most of it is wasted time. We don't even realize this because we've been, we're so used to that jail that we forget a lot of these things. So you can actually compress that. And then, 2 hours में, okay, बच्चा खत्म हो गया, तू मुझे सिखा, तू क्या सीखा, फिर तुझको जो करने का है कर, कुछ नहीं करना है तो कुछ मत कर. It's really your life. I'll come back to that again. And the fourth thing kids require is other friends to learn with. Because learning is a social activity. You don't learn by yourself. You don't learn alone. In fact, most of us learn because other kids taught us, or we taught other kids. These could be juniors, that could be seniors, or whatever else. Which means, and there are lots of real life, these are what we call community-based learning pods. If you're an engineer who's a mom who's chosen to stay at home because she wants to teach a kid, please teach your kid at home. You're much more qualified than any school teacher. You don't need a B.Ed degree. You need a B.Ed degree to manage a group of 40 kids. You're managing your one single kid. So you already can do everything else. You're highly qualified. You have much more skin in the game than a school teacher. Every year the school teacher changes. Every 40 minutes the subject changes. Most school teachers can't even remember the names of their kids unless you're either the topper or you're the complete duffer. Most other kids are just a homogeneous mess. You care about your kid. You will make sure. And get the neighborhood kids to come and learn with your kids. Think about this. Zero commute, so you don't waste any time. The other parents will trust you because you're a parent in that neighborhood, in that community. They know that if you're going to teach your kid, you're going to teach their kids as well. They respect you because you're a professional, because you're there. You'll feed the kids. You'll make sure, so many things. You can then start doing so many magical things. You can take them to the zoo. You can take them to, whatever else you want. You can do so many additional activities. I think the communists here, extracurricular activities कैसे करेंगे? बच्चे socialize कैसे करेंगे? First, you do not learn to socialize in school. All you learn to do in school is sit on that chair and listen to that teacher yap away and either go to sleep on the back bench or get bored or whatever else. Let's be honest about this. You only socialize in 15 minutes of recess, maybe the 30 minutes of lunch where you're busy wolfing down, or maybe 30 minutes of games or whatever you have. That's about it. You call that socialization? You're kidding yourself. Because who are you socializing with? Kids your own age. But in real life, that's not going to be. You're talking to me. The age gap between us is 30 years.
40.
We would never have met, for example, if we were in school. But online platforms allow you to bridge all these artificial gaps. These are real life learning lessons you can give your kids. And I think that's the huge opportunity. But tubelight chamakne ko time lagta hai. So I think that's fine. I think a change will happen. Sorry, go ahead.
So I had this one thing, like you said, we need both community and obviously parents' attention, like adult supervision, both of the things. I don't think both exist at the same time everywhere, anywhere in India. Because so most of the people, even right now, I'm living here in Pune, like I don't even know my neighbors. No one knows each other. Most of the people don't. So the community thing is not here. And at the same time, in villages where communities and everything exist, but the adults are not very much qualified to supervise their kids on devices and stuff, because they are getting supervised themselves from kids only.
Okay, I'll answer both your questions. I think communities don't create themselves. You need to step out and create. So tomorrow, if you have a neighbor, I'm sure if your neighbor was a beautiful looking hot chick, sorry, pardon, I'm being very physically incorrect here, but I'm going to get away with it.
There is one. There is one, and I'm trying. There is one, and I'm trying.
You would get to know her very quickly. So don't give me all this rubbish. If you really decided you want to find out someone, whether she's on the same bus stop as you, or she happens to go to the same supermarket or the restaurant or whatever, it's very easy to figure all that stuff out. It just requires intrinsic motivation. Remember, Tushar? So I think if you have that, so if you decide as a parent, I need to reach out to other parents, of course that will happen. And there's so many ways of doing it. And if you have a 5-year-old kid, you're likely to hang out with parents of other 5-year-old kids and 6-year-old kids, because everyone is there. So I don't agree with you about this community and society business. This is a safe community. It's a safe neighborhood, because people want their kids to be safe. You're providing them with that adult supervision. And then if you tell me, boss, don't tell me that adults aren't capable of learning how to use devices. Huh? That is also extremely ageist. Boss, अगर 6 साल का बच्चा लैपटॉप सीख सकता है, तो क्या 40 साल की औरत लैपटॉप नहीं सीख सकती है? I think that's being very patronizing and unfair. So, she is not teaching academics. She's not teaching him history or geography. She's just supervising. He's learning it from a YouTube. She's learning it from a Stanford professor who's the world's best professor on history, geography, whatever else you want. All the world's best professors are available on YouTube. All you need to do is supervise your kid and tell him watch.
They can learn.
That's so hard.
They can learn, but it's not about being ageist or something like that. It's just, okay, so a parent who has learned English and everything.
I'm provoking Tushar a little bit. I need to So what are you saying?
So I was just saying, for a parent who is who knows English and everything, so for them adopting to a device is easy. But my mom, who doesn't know much about English, and for them it's hard. I'm not saying it's an age thing.
Maybe I should take on this assignment of getting your mom to teach. So again, let me step back. Kids learn when they need to learn. Everyone will learn when they need to learn. If they don't need to learn, मुझे क्या फर्क पड़ रहा है? ये तुम लोग करो. So I think there are enough solutions for a lot of this problem. When you talk about touch screens, does your mom use WhatsApp?
Yeah. But I had to taught.
Fine, but you taught her once. Someone else will teach her. None of these are good answers.
But
I think it's up to us to create a good UX. It's up to us to create a good UX, UI, and a good use case. If there is a suitable use case, if tomorrow she saved 100 rupees by opening a laptop every single day, I guarantee you she will use a laptop every single day. It's just a question of incentives. So my hypothesis in life is everyone can learn everything. Everyone can teach everything. I refuse to believe that just because she can't speak English, she's not capable of learning. She can cook far better than you can, right, Tushar? So,
okay, I think
just because you can happen to use a keyboard and a computer doesn't make you any smarter than her. She has a different skill set, is all I'm trying to say. I think you need to appreciate and admire that skill set and then make it in such a way that it's intuitive and natural for her to want to learn. If we can't teach someone else, the fault is ours. We're bad teachers. Let's not blame the student for failing to learn, okay? Accept the fact, boss, ye mere bas ki baat nahi, main sikhana nahi chahta hu. All that is fine. Then these are all excuses, reasons, I don't really care. But I've yet to meet someone who, if it was in their best interest to learn, will not learn. Illiterate people learn how to use a computer.
I live alone, so I really appreciate my mom's food and everything. But
I'm glad. So better late than never. So I think that's fine. You only appreciate people in their absence. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think a lot of that stuff is. So I think a lot of it is. There are some things in life. I always assume positive intent. I always assume people want good for themselves and for others. I think it's a big world. मेरा ज़्यादा होने से कोई दूसरे का कम नहीं होता है. So I believe that. And I think it's possible to find people who will learn and teach, and it could be, grandchildren treat grandparents. Grandparents teach. You teach different skills, you teach different sets, and that's okay. And in a way, actually, that increases bonding so much more. There's so much, I think when you insult people by, you're so stupid, you don't understand, that causes problems. When you're saying, yes, I had a hard time learning how to do this. This is how I finally figured it out. Why don't I show you? Oh, you don't know how to use it? Never mind. Here's a YouTube video in Hindi on how to use a laptop. So मैं तो सिखा नहीं सकता. Let's watch this video together and then let's try. So there's always an answer.
What I'm trying to get from all of this is कि like it is difficult, but if the incentives are right, like if parents can really understand कि okay, learning this device will help their children in some manner, then they will do this.
Absolutely right. And they should not underestimate their ability and their skill to be able to do that. I think part of it is the default is बच्चा पढ़ेगा कैसे, स्कूल में डालेगा. तो lot of parents think एक बार मैंने बच्चे को स्कूल की एडमिशन दे दी, मेरा काम हो गया ना. I don't need to worry about my kid for the next 10 years. कॉलेज के टाइम पे देखेंगे. That doesn't work anymore. The sooner you realize, the rich people, the rich parents understand this. Unfortunately, it's always the poor who don't. And obviously, rich parents want poor parents' kids to become clerks and peons and Zomato drivers and stuff like that. So it's very much in their interest to make sure that these kids continue going to mindless schools and doing all these exams, which will only fit them for doing this particular thing. That's part of the tragedy.
What do you think, like, what's different develop in a child if he's like homeschooled or something like that? Okay, so
I think
in a school thing we get ki, like they become more obedient, they become more disciplined, there's less creativity because you can't move outside the box.
There's a big difference between enforced discipline and self-discipline. Please don't forget the two, okay? Enforced discipline is someone is sitting with a danda on your head and making you do something. Usko main discipline नहीं समझता हूँ. वो तो मैं तुझको जेल में lock up करूँगा, तू भी discipline होगा. Self-discipline is whether I feel like it or not, I will get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do my workout. Homeschooling will give you self-discipline. Traditional schooling will kill your self-discipline because you're so forced to do things which other people tell you. So I don't agree with the discipline. I don't agree with the socializing piece. What is LGR? Teaches you to be obedient and compliant. That's hardly a good trait. It just teaches you to mindlessly, boss ne bola wo karne ka. Even if the boss is a gada and you can see that what he's doing is completely. You want people who will speak up. Even bosses want juniors who will tell them, tell me what I'm doing wrong. I'm happy to fix the problem. What else? And when you're at home school, you're independent, you're respected. You have to become, I think the one thing we all need to do is learn how to learn. And that's the one thing which homeschooling forces you. We're not saying you chatti mein yehi padhai karo, ye karo, tujhko kitna padhne ka hai, tujhko पांचवी में calculus padhna hai, padhna, mana kaun kar raha hai, ye tutorial hai, ye hai, and that's fine. If the one thing I would tell kids is, please play lots of games, whether it's Roblox, whether it's Epic Games, Fortnite, whatever, but learn to create the games. Consuming is a passive activity. That's what you do sitting in a classroom because you consume what your teacher tells you. If you actually created your own games, you would learn so much about this. Would make you future ready. You would learn to become a creator. You would learn to do 50 other. You would then have a skill set which people will pay you for. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It is making
So
sense.
that's just one example. There are 50 different things. You want to be an artist? Go ahead. Try selling NFTs. See what happens. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But unless you do the experiment, you never know what will work.
I want to ask about your. So did you send your kids to school, and how did you monitor your kids' learning?
So I have two daughters. They're adults now. The available at that time was very, very. I don't even think there was a Khan Academy. I did have a computer and a desktop which I would use with a monochrome monitor, with a dial-up modem and stuff like that. So it still would take forever and ever. So again, this thing, times have changed a lot. I think rather than ask me how I brought up my kids, which was, an entire generation ago. So what I did 30 years ago is completely irrelevant from what I'm doing today. What you should ask me is how I would bring up my kids today if I were a parent. That's a much more relevant question. Because why would you want to do all the stupid things which I did 30 years ago? They mostly be completely wrong and incorrect. Yeah.
So how would you do it today now?
I would tell them. But I would look for what interests them. I would let them lead. I would look for teachable moments. We're watching an ad on TV together. What is this ad about? Oh, someone is going surfing. How do you surf? How do you manage to not sink, drown, whatever else? Should we go see how? I mean, there's so many different. It's really up to you. There's no shortage of teachable moments. And I would say, boss, मुझको तो surfing के बारे में कुछ आता नहीं, but I have a very good friend who goes surfing.
I really myself I also like really, you can say, resonate with this interesting, because like I took up science in 11th, and now what I read mostly is philosophy because I like that.
But I think all these distinctions into subjects, and this is history and this geography, are all stupid. It's all silos which actually don't exist. This is all the hangover, college professors, abhi apan ye karenge, wo karenge. Real life is not like that. No real life problem is going to come bucket it to you and to say, you apply Pythagoras theorem to solve me. It's going to be 50 different things. Real life is messy. And that's what you want to teach kids, how to solve problems, solve their own problems, critical thinking skills, creativity, divergent thinking, 50 different things. And these are all solved problems. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to do anything else. All you need to do is learn to love your kids and have enough confidence that you can find the right solutions for them. But people are so brainwashed right now that it's very hard to give parents that confidence. I tell parents, you know much more about your kids than your teacher will, that they agree. You know much more about helping your kids to learn than a teacher will. Because a teacher is loaded with 50 different stupid clerical activities. Attendance low, roll call low, kaun pass hua, kaun fail hua, ye karo, wo karo, administration karo, classroom mein 40 bacche hai, you give selective attention to whatever. The teacher is not an expert in how your kid learns. You're the expert on how your kid should be learning. Make the most of it. Don't underestimate your kid. Your kid is not lazy and your kid is not stupid. And if your kid is getting bored in school, it's the school which is failing your kid. It's the school's fault, not your kid's fault. Please be your kid's advocate. Stand up for your kid. And there are enough resources available outside the four walls of school for you to be able to do that. So you can go join hobby classes. You can go join sports, games, activities, everything else. Don't coop your school is a jail. It takes a long time for us to realize that because we've been brainwashed.
Why do you think like we were brainwashed?
I was. If you weren't good for you, I think, and you know what?
I'm not saying like what stem like from where it stems.
Because you spent 11, 12 years in a system which doesn't encourage you to rock the boat, doesn't encourage you to ask any questions. You do what everyone else is doing. You did what your parents did, and therefore you expect your kids to do what you did. What we've forgotten is the entire world has changed. The external environment has changed. We need to respect that. So I think if parents had more confidence in their ability, and if they had more confidence in their kids' abilities, all these problems would go away. Will take time. I don't expect any of this to happen quickly, and that's fine.
If we're talking about time, like parents, do parents really have time for all this?
Boss, if you don't have time to bring up your kids, then why did you have kids in the first place? So I think that's the first thing you need to be asking yourself. So I think the reality is that if it's a journey, it's an enjoyable learning journey for both people. Kids are great people to hang out with, and parents are great people to hang out with also. So why that love, devotion, everything else, that family unit is there. No one else has more skin in the game, and that works both ways. Part of the problem is that when your kids are young, you force them to do something. So by the time the kids become adult and you become old and dependent on them, then they start bullying you and doing things. I think that's such an unhealthy relationship, and there are so many better solutions. And in fact, the joint family system is a great way of doing a lot of these things, because you would get to learn from so many other people in the family, different ages, different businesses, different so many things. So I think a lot of it is we've wasted, we've thrown away. We have ended up doing a lot of harm to ourselves. But I'm a big believer in that, kabhi na kabhi to bhi tubelight jamkega. And when will it happen? It'll happen when we start having a lot of these mainstream homeschooling success stories. When people will stand, like Elon Musk homeschools his kids. Standard answer. The moment someone says, "Arey yaar, lekin main Elon Musk thodi hu," so people will always find excuses and reasons. But I think a lot of that stuff has happened. So I think baby steps in the beginning, say, don't obsess about marks, don't obsess about exams, don't obsess about homework. Please don't send your kids to tuitions. I think every parent should take a vow कि मैं मेरे बच्चे को ट्यूशन नहीं भेजा. मैं नहीं भेजूंगा तो शर्मा जी का बेटा जाएगा ट्यूशंस के लिए, तो मेरे बेचारा बेटा का क्या होगा? Your kid will do 100 times better in life because he's not filling his head with all that rubbish which that tuition teacher is teaching. So that's step number one. Baby steps. If you stop sending your kids to tuitions, then your kid will be able to learn for himself at home. He'll be able to revise whatever has happened. He will start using the flipped classroom model. He will revise everything which the teacher couldn't explain because the teacher was an idiot or there was too much noise or the kid was distracted or happened to sleep after lunch in that class, because he can watch that same class in Khan's Academy. So he'll be able to keep up, and so many good things can happen.
I can still remember one class in my 5th class. So what happened was there was this SST teacher and she just completed one chapter. She was just saying, okay, the chapter is complete. We will start a new chapter from tomorrow. And I was just talking to my friend. So she called me in front. And अब मैं उनके सबसे सामने पहले बेंच पे मैंने कहा बोर हो रहा हूँ, क्या करूँ? मैं नेक्स्ट चैप्टर पढ़ना शुरू कर दिया. एंड आई डोंट नो लाइक वाज शी फ्रस्ट्रेटेड और व्हाट. मेरे को पहले पैराग्राफ में कुछ वर्ड्स नहीं समझा. मैंने जस्ट उनसे पूछा कि लाइक व्हाट डज इट मीन. शी स्लैप्ड मी.
Oh shit.
It's like, okay. After
but I think two interesting things, Tushar. That this one memory has remained with you after so many years.
Yes.
And I think we need to remember that the power of a good teacher to do good and transform you is so much. The power of a bad teacher to scar you is also so much. And the reality is most teachers are going to be mediocre. And the chance of finding a bad teacher are much higher than finding a good teacher. And I'm really, really glad you brought up that story. And all of us have this. The trouble is, over time, our memory plays games with us. Selectively distort all the bad times. We selectively remember all the good times. We remember all our friends and stuff. We forget all the times we were bullied. We forget all the times we were ragged. All the times when we were made to do things we didn't want to do, detention, so many things. We're very good at fooling ourselves, Tushar. That's not going to change.
Actually, I've heard the opposite story. Like, parents are really proud of this thing. Like, okay, they were beaten up. Like, you are not beaten up.
I think that's part of the problem. I think that's the attitude. Your attitude is, बच्चा क्यों पीटेगा नहीं तो बच्चा कुछ सीखेगा नहीं. And this is an unhealthy attitude. Kids do not need beatings and they do not need bribings to learn. Kids are wired to learn if you allow them to learn what they want. If you give them the freedom, you need to accept the fact that learning is a random process. Today you'll learn about the heart, you'll forget about it for 2 years, then something else will come up, you'll pick it up, and that background of learning will remain with you. So learning is not a linear process. Let's not fool ourselves. It's random, it's meandering, who knows what will happen. But if you've learned it for yourself, you'll never forget it.
I think people in city get this, like, okay, beating children is wrong in some sense, because earlier I used to study in Delhi. So what happened was there's some other school, that was the story from there. So एक लड़की थी, I think she was doing something, like she was talking to friend or something on the front bench. मैम गई उनके पास और बोली कि लाइक बात क्यों कर रहे हो, ये वो ये, लाइक मैं पढ़ा रही हूँ. वो खड़ी और वो बोल रही कि आजकल न्यूज़पेपर नहीं पढ़ते क्या मैम. एंड दैट वाज बेसिकली अ रेफरेंस कि लाइक ओके, न्यूज़पेपर में आज सुबह ही खबर आई है कि एक बच्चे ने अपने टीचर को मार दिया. So it was a hate. And on the flip side,
honestly, I don't think teachers want to abuse kids, and I don't think kids go to school in order to abuse teachers. Okay, I'm not saying that there won't be exceptions, but that's hardly fair to generalize. Most people want to lead a happy life. They want to this thing. I don't think any of that is a problem. I think it's just a question of yes. And you're right, the pendulum swings always. Teachers are increasingly realizing you can't beat up kids, especially in public. Parents are realizing that beating up kids is not the smartest, and we're all evolving and we're learning. But again, my emphasis is I'm a big believer that we can learn, and I'm a big believer that we can do a better job. The way I look at it is life is such a mess right now with the current schooling system that anything has to be an improvement for the better. We can't do any worse than we already are. That's why I think I'm an optimist.
I have a question. So right now you are currently a doctor, right? So let's say you were to start again in your 20, what would you learn and do as a profession or to make money? Would it be doctor again or something else?
Honestly, I think, remember, I mean, I'm a dinosaur now. I'm 60. So at that time, if you were a bright student, you either became a doctor or you became an
Engineer.
engineer. If
Yeah.
you weren't such a bright student, you did commerce. And if you were a duffer, you did arts. I mean, that was it. So it was like,
Same.
so that's what I meant about brainwashed and, siloed and stuff like that.
It's still true. It's still true to some extent. Most people follow this.
That's a formula for unhappiness. What would I do? I would optimize for happiness. My hypothesis is that if you care about something, there are enough opportunities to make tons of money no matter what. So, you can be a good doctor, you can be a bad doctor. I mean, there's just so many things. So I honestly wouldn't know. I would explore a lot of things like the metaverse, AR, VR, game, because I think that's where the world is headed. And no one knows how these things are going to evolve. So I would like to be at the cutting edge of things. I honestly believe that all advance occurs at the border of two fields, at the boundary. So you need to know lots of this, you need to know a lot of this. And that's when the magic happens. If you know too much about one subject, then that's all you know about. And then you become so narrow-minded and myopic that you can't think about anything else. And that's why you don't want to be just too superficial about too many things. So that's basically what
Tunnel
the
vision.
formula is.
Tunnel vision.
If you know too much. And that's the advantage of knowing quite a lot about quite a lot of things and then finding out what interests you and then allowing it to evolve. So the books I'm reading today are very different from the books I was reading 5 years from now. And I expect that, again, that'll keep on changing and evolve. I don't expect to remain the same person.
If we're talking about engineers and lawyers, like there was this one tweet I was really interested in, and it was our bureaucracy would improve dramatically if more doctors, lawyers, engineers, and CS become IS officers. What was that about?
So I think part of what happens is typically with a lot of these guys who enter the IAS, their entire target is UPSC crack karne ka. So then they will usually enter whatever, a college which doesn't have very demanding academic requirements for whatever reason. And then your major focus is you're spending your time doing that. And, obviously you're bright, you're able to cram, you get into it. But you miss a lot of the bigger picture. Now, suppose, for example, someone had done 5.5 years of medical college. They've spent time with patients, so they understand patient ka dukh dard kya hota hai. So when you're an IS officer, you'll at least understand a little bit more about. But equally importantly, you will make friends during your medical college. So that 10 years from now, when you become a collector or whatever else as an IS officer, these friends who've been practicing medicine for 10 years will be able to tell you, boss, this is what our problems are. This is how you messing up our life. These are the kind of patient-friendly laws which the government needs to be coming up with. And I think that professional education gives you a particular way of thinking about life, about problems, about how to solve these problems, how to think about it. And I think we need a lot more of that. So I'm not saying it should be multidisciplinary even within the IS, because I think IS officers are great as generalists, but they lose some of that. And I'm a big believer in what I call the T-shaped model of life, which means, you learn a lot of expertise within one particular thing, and then you start applying it across other things, which is not perhaps what the IS was originally, because don't forget, it was set up by the British, where you wanted 10,000 officers to rule a country of 100 million. And how did you do that? And that requirement was very different. And today's requirement is very different. Because that time medicine hadn't evolved much, engineering hadn't evolved much. So it was still possible for people to understand quite a lot of it. No longer true anymore.
So I think a lot of things you believe in and want to improve are probably policy decisions which the government takes. So did it ever cross your mind to join the government, or maybe shake hands with them, ki I will become the advisor?
How do you join the government? You either become a bureaucrat, or you become a politician. Those are the only two ways of joining this.
Yeah.
I'm not corrupt enough to be a politician. Let me rephrase that. I think it's a politician's job is very hard, okay? It's not easy. They're working all the time because everyone comes to you with their problems and you have to solve them. And the trouble is you're lying all the time. Because you know that the politician you're talking to today is your friend, tomorrow is your enemy. He's lying to you, you're lying to him. But like I said before, I can't manage all that. Yeah, I mean, the good thing about saying the truth is you need a very limited memory.
Yep.
Because all you need to do is remember the truth. You don't have to worry about that. So I don't think I'd ever become a politician. I think being a bureaucrat, I think there are two ways of doing things in life, top down and bottom up. And I think top down is fine, but is very short lived. I'm a much bigger believer in bottom up. Because I think top-down is a very blunt instrument which causes a lot of harm. Because a lot of people get harmed during some of these processes which you do for the greater good. And we're not aware of that. And I would much rather be a believer in using the bottom-up approach. Do I think anything which I say is going to make a significant difference? Very unlikely. Partly because now I'm old enough to realize there's just too many vested interests. There's too much inertia within the system. And I've come to terms with that, and I've come to peace with that. It doesn't matter. I'm not looking for a short-term gain. Maybe what I say, maybe when Tushar grows up 10 years from now, he'll be in a position of power. Maybe Mitesh will have become a billionaire by then and will then want, who knows? How does it make any difference? I'm very outcome agnostic. I'll keep on plugging on. All I want for people to remember is what I'm saying is the truth. I have no vested interests. I have no axe to grind. I say what I believe in. That's enough.
Okay, so there's one question. Like, most of the people I see of your age, or like around 40, 50, most of the people I see, they're very rigid about their ideas. Like, they have constrained themselves in some ideas. Like they are doctors, so they are just doctor. They are not outside. What influenced you to like go outside and like
Become a
because
VC, an
because
angel investor, sorry.
angel investor in
No,
everything you're doing. Like,
I
what
think
influenced?
a lot of it is, I didn't plan to become an angel investor. I think life is kind. And I think one of my tweets is that children raise parents. And my daughter, after she did her undergrad, then she got a scholarship to go to Oxford, Cambridge, then she did an MBA, and then she was working for this financial impact firm. And at some point, you don't want to appear to be an idiot to your daughter. You need to know at least as much as your daughter does, if nothing else. And my whole hypothesis was, सीख सकती तो मैं भी सीख सकता हूँ, मैं थोड़ी कोई गधा हूँ. So then you would read the books and you would then say, okay, now I know this theory. How do I apply it? Like I said, the markets were kind. God was kind. You made a lot of wealth. How do you deploy some of that wealth? And a lot of these opportunities came up, and I was willing to strike out and run these experiments because you can't tell people to do something and not do it yourself. So I was happy to do that. And like I keep on saying, happy to have had friends. And I'm very excited to be an angel investor because you get to hang out with young entrepreneurs. And that keeps you on your toes. You need to keep on learning. If for no other else, then you can't allow them to take you for a ride. If someone says, this is the cool ML AI algorithm I've come up with, then you don't want to be an idiot and you want to say, "Arey yaar, this is rubbish, ye to easily available hai," or this is available on so many things. So I think all this stuff keeps you on your toes, keeps you young. That's priceless. So I wear multiple hats. I wear a hat as a husband. I wear a hat as a parent. I wear a hat as a doctor. And even when I talk to my patients, I'm very careful. I'm saying if I had 100% IVF success rates, I would not waste your time and my time talking to you. I would say, पैसा दे दे, बच्चा लेके जा, तू भी खुश, मैं भी खुश. Nothing in the world is like that. You need to understand the limitations. And you need to understand I'm not a mind reader. And I don't know what your preferences are. And there are always options. You could choose to adopt a kid. That might be the best for you. You could choose to remain child-free. You could choose to do IVF. My job as a doctor is to explain your options to you, explain the pros and cons, and allow you to make a decision which is right for you. If I agree with your decision, I'm happy to treat you. If I don't agree with your decision, find some other doctor. Maybe I'm not the right doctor for you. That's why we have so much patient educational content on our website. At Doctor, which is one of the world's first IVF websites. We've got over 2,000 pages of content. I have a YouTube channel where I talk to patients. But I'm not telling them come to me. I'm saying this is what you need to look for in a good doctor. And you need to look for something very simple. You just need to make sure that your doctor gives you photographs of your embryos. That's such a simple message. We keep on repeating it. The word doctor is derived from the word dossier, which means to teach. So I teach patients. And a lot of people say, "Arey yaar, you teach patients. Why don't you teach other doctors?" I said, doctor को सिखाने से कोई फायदा नहीं. खराब डॉक्टर तो कभी सुधरने नहीं वाले और अच्छे डॉक्टर ऑलरेडी अच्छे हैं तो उनको सिखाने से क्या मतलब. So I think there's lots more and there are 1,000 patients for one doctor. So if you're willing to teach patients, this thing is so much more. And I think a lot of the patient education piece and the angel investing piece and being a doctor has fallen into place very well. As a doctor, I am an entrepreneur. So I understand what an entrepreneur's pain point. In one sense, I'm running I won't call it a startup, but I'm running a small business. I understand the importance of delighting patients. As a doctor, I try to be kind and empathetic to my patients. And we try to teach. I try to be kind and empathetic to my entrepreneurs. I will try to teach them to be kind and empathetic to their users as well. And I think a lot of it is because you're doing it in public as far as possible. I think you bring a lot of value add to that relationship, because it's not just a financial transaction between investor and entrepreneur. Not a financial transaction between doctor and patient. It's actually true at multiple different levels. And I think, like I said before, the good thing is I continue practicing medicine. I'm a good doctor. The emotional income which I get out of getting patients pregnant is, no amount of financial income could ever meet that. Because their entire patient's life changes once you give them a baby. And that's what I try to tell my entrepreneurs. Don't worry about valuations. Don't worry about funding. Don't worry about, these are all stupid vanity metrics. Play the long game. Do something worthwhile which you'll be happy with 30 years from now. No one ever wants to listen to me, of course.
Do you tell your patients once they get the baby that इनको homeschool करना, school मत भेजना?
I never tell anyone anything. I don't tell my daughters anything either. वो मेरे थोड़ा ही सुनते हैं, क्योंकि patients थोड़ी ही सुनने वाले हैं. So that is why I'm a big believer in using a public platform. This is my hypothesis. These are the reasons for my hypothesis. Feel free to disagree. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but this is the backing. Am I an educator? No. Am I an expert? No. But you know what? I've read enough books written by experts to be able to say this is something which makes sense. Don't agree with me? That's fine. But please read this book at least, and then disagree with me respectfully. If you can tell me why John Holt is wrong or why John Gatto is wrong, I'm happy to revise my opinions.
I think you're so much into learning that I remember this one podcast that the reason you used to post daily on LinkedIn because you wanted to learn more. So the daily posting on LinkedIn helped you learn कि आज post करना है, learn करना था.
And that's all these things are positive virtuous cycles. That's the reason I tweet so frequently on Twitter. A lot of people say you tweet so much, your signal will get diluted. People don't know what you stand for. I said, but I don't have a brand. I'm not trying to sell anything to anyone. And this is what I believe in. And, sometimes these are random thoughts. These are whatever else it is. So usually there's a random thought. I'll read about it. You read about it automatically. That book gives you 50 different insights. Till you read, 5 other books more. It's a happy exploration. Happy to do it.
This one time we told about that how when a company hypergrowths, there is when they cross the Dunbar's number, there is a problem with the culture inside the company, and how as an entrepreneur you should actually make sure that the culture is intact. So how does someone do that? That keeping that culture intact, and how do you know it's a good culture?
So it's very easy to identify toxic cultures. I think Byjus is a great example. Sorry, people keep on saying this on my mind, but I think it's a great example. So why not? So they hire and fire, and there's so much churn, and and people aren't stupid. You can straight away make out that you're misselling. If you're hiding facts from your boss, if your team members don't think of you as a team member, if people don't want help on board you, I don't think any of that is hard. Coming back to your question, I think the reality is that a lot of these are solved problems. There are enough books which describe how to create a healthy culture. So I think it's, would I teach someone how to create a healthy culture? Of course not. What do I know about it? I have a clinic of maybe 15 people. I haven't done that. But I can tell you, read this book, because this book was written by, it's not just a theoretical book. It was written by an expert who's actually done this. A lot of people are very critical. Arey yaar, books are all theoretical knowledge. I say, वो theoretical knowledge को ऊपर से टपका नहीं है. उसके 30 साल बैठ के कंपनी खड़ी की है, and he's willing to be generous enough, and he's willing to share our information for you. Why are you so lazy that you're not willing to read that book? And if you're so lazy that you're not willing to read that book, then you obviously will learn to need to make your own mistakes. So I think they're just so, and that's the one thing I like about Silicon Valley culture. People are willing to share. And that's the one thing I hate about the Indian startup ecosystem. And that's partly, again, the schooling system. अगर मुझे marks ज़्यादा मिलेंगे तो दूसरे को कम मिलने चाहिए.
Cheating नहीं करानी होती. Cheating नहीं करानी होती class में.
No, but I mean, just so many things. You don't want to share a good book, or you don't want to share a good something we have learned, because the other person will get more marks from you. 50 different things. So again, I think that's a very toxic environment overall, and we need to change some of that. We need to say, boss, तेरे ज़्यादा पैसे कमाने से मेरे पैसे कुछ कम नहीं होने वाले. तू भी खुश, मैं भी खुश. So many things.
शेयर भी करते तो फ्लेक्स आ रहा होता है कि हाँ आरडी शर्मा पढ़ के आया हूँ मैं.
Oh, but yes, yeah, that's not my idea of reading, but okay, if that's what turns you on, I have no problem. Okay, guys, time for us to wrap up. One
Yep,
last
yep,
question, and then we'll take it from there.
yep.
Okay,
Then Dishad, you can ask.
I think we can just end up on like, what's your favorite books? Because I don't know, people like that question a lot. Like they want to know like
Yeah.
books
And I
people like.
think Mr.
You know,
Malpani won't ask me.
I've had only one favorite wife all my life. This one. But the whole thing about books is you can read as many books as you
Yes,
like.
yes,
So the answer I give you today will be very different from the answer. So the best books are the ones you reread, and every time you
yes.
reread the book, it gives you a different lesson.
Different perspective.
I'm not hung up or focused about anything. And you know, honestly, the book I like the best will perhaps be the completely wrong book for you. The reason I like it the best is because I've read 100 other books, which helps me to build on this thing. So I'm a big believer in learn to read for yourself. Don't be a slave to the book. Stupid to read from page 1 to page 100. Devour the book. You're the master. It's your book. You bought it, boss. You know, get bored after 20 pages, give it up. Or just read page number 8 because of, you know, chapter number 30 because that's the only one. That I think you need to cut. So I do that all the time. I read multiple books, read books in parallel. That's actually a great learning mechanism. It actually reinforces. And it's something called interleaving, which means if you read a book on, let's say, EBITDA on book number 1, and you need EBITDA again in book number 2, that information gets reinforced because someone will describe it with one metaphor. Someone will tell a story which adds additional illumination or light on whatever it is. I always tell people I'm a slow learner, so I need to read multiple books in order to understand what's happening, which works well for me.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Okay, thank you very much, guys.